Hello, welcome to Podfic Galore. I'm your horrible online reader, Goldskythe. I read out loud fanfictions for you busy bees, free of charge and no strings attached. Today, I will continue reading the Silmarillion fic by Aeolian Sands from Archive of Our Own called The Rescue Party. I hope you can at least try to enjoy my voice, and I will try my best for you with the equipment available for me. On with the show. The Rescue Party by Aeolian Sands. Chapter 31. Love You Forever. Ecthelion was becoming increasingly concerned. They had pressed on through much of the night, despite the torrential downpour. After hours of slogging through mud, Fëanor had finally granted them rest just before they reached the Isle of Werewolves. This was a mighty good thing, because while Ecthelion didn't count himself a strategist, it seemed to him a poor idea to face the wolves of Sauron at night in a blinding thunderstorm. They had only slept in the cottonwoods that grew by the river for a few hours. Then Fëanor had woken them all before dawn, declaring that they must march again. They had not eaten. This was not good, since although Rog would be fine, Glorfindel tended to become exceedingly grumpy if he went too long without food. Ecthelion was half surprised that the blonde had not made them stop to catch a few fish for breakfast, but then he knew the reason, and it wasn't Fëanor. No, if it was Fëanor alone that he had to deal with, then Glorfindel would have wrestled him into the water before the Spirit of Fire dared to force him to skip a meal or wake too early. The main problem stopping Glorfindel was thus not the son of Finwë, but the charging lioness at his side. Aradhel's eyes had taken on a wild, crazed glint as she commanded them ever onward, her beautiful white dress in tatters and dark hair escaping its braids. If any man saw her, he would think that the children's tales of banshees were fact. Finally, when the single tower of Tol in Gauroth loomed before them, solemn and morose in the center of the river, Glorfindel cleared his throat. Ecthelion turned to see that his friend was standing under a tall apple tree, its low-hanging fruit already taken by other travelers, or wolves. Princess Aradhel, we should stop and climb this tree and grab some fruit. We need nourishment to keep our strength, the half Vanya said, the look on his face like that of a puppy finding a bone just out of reach. The lady whirled. Every second we delay, Glorfindel, is the second my son does not have. Loda will be of no help to your son if you starve him, Rog pointed out. Aradhel huffed, took her bow off her back, and strung an arrow. The rapidly fired arrowhead whistled briefly before lancing an apple through its core, filling it to land at Glorfindel's feet with an audible plop. An awkward silence followed as all looked at the fallen fruit. There, the princess said, as if all problems were solved. However, one apple would clearly not suffice. Rog raised his hand as if to point this out, but Aradhel only glared at him, notching another arrow. Unfortunately, this shot went wide. She was about to fire off a third when Ecthelion put a gentle hand on her shoulder. Don't lose too many arrows, he warned. She was the only one with a bow, and they couldn't afford to waste her limited arrows on apples. The princess rolled her eyes and looked behind her to Fëanor for support, but the smith just shrugged. Evidently, even he was hungry. Ecthelion turned to see that Rog was taking the apple issue into his own hands. The Lord of the Hammer leapt, and swung himself up to stand on one of the low branches of the tree. He then deftly climbed a few more and then began shaking the trunk. The whole tree shuddered, swaying back and forth as apples rained down on them. Rog jumped down, landing in a crouch. Enough for us all, he said, picking a few of the larger ones off the ground. Ecthelion took an apple himself. Great, he said, taking a bite. I'm sure no wolf saw that. He spoke too soon. At once there was a growl from ahead of where Aradhel and Fëanor stood. All 5 elves turned to see a monstrous creature with grey fur snarling at them. Drool dropped from fangs the size of knives. Glorfindel held his apple in his mouth and unsheathed his sword. Everyone else was sensible enough to drop their snacks before wielding weapons. Wait! Aradhel called, grabbing Fëanor's wrist. She stared the wolf in the eyes, sapphire drilling into ruby. The wolf growled. Trespassing, it uttered, the word sounding twisted and painful as if the creature was not meant to speak. I lost my only pup, Aradhel said slowly, and poor Ecthelion had to keep himself from groaning. Gelacorn would be so proud of his little cousin. My pack and I, she gestured at the others, only wish to find him. We only pass through. Pop! The creature snarled. Then something strange happened. There was a flash of something intelligent, something akin to sorrow in those red eyes. And Ecthelion wondered what sort of twisted spirit had been forced to live in this destroyed body. Yes, Aradhel answered. Child of Twilight. Winyan, young one. My pup, the wolf said. Aradhel nodded. You lost your pup too. I am sorry that you know my pain. Mother's pain? The creature growled, lowering its head. Yes, a mother's pain, Aradhel answered gently. The wolf did not lift its head. Go, it said, and they did not need to be told twice, although all the male elves did stoop to grab several apples before following the princess who needed food not. Gil-galad had heard tales of the sea. Some of the tribesmen who ventured far enough to see the coast had returned to tell stories of a great mass of water, deeper than any lake, that stretched to the ends of the world. The sea to him was a mythical place where monsters lurked in the deep, and where elves tempted fate by sailing the waves. He hadn't expected to see it for himself. He certainly never expected to sail on it. "Bring in the main sheet a bit!" Andreth shouted above the wind. She was at the tiller, hair tousled by the breeze, a smile as bright as a star on her face. Gil-galad looked at the assembly of rigging before him. The main sheet connects to the main sail, so I guess it would be this one. He picked up the most promising rope and looped it around a winch. "No need to winch it! Just give it a good tug!" she shouted above the wind. Gil-galad sighed. He was just trying to do things correctly. He grabbed the rope with both hands and heaved. The sail pulled in. He looked back and saw Andreth give him the thumbs-up sign. He sighed again. Truth to be told, he was still uncomfortable with how Andreth was now an elf. Why did Ardur and his friend have to change her? What exactly were they that they had the power to do so? How did Andreth know that they could do it? What bothered him most was that he knew in the forest that Ardur was no regular stranger. Yet he had become complacent, allowing himself to be deceived. Even if ultimately Ardur had been a friend who had helped grant Andreth her wish, it did not sit well with Gil-galad that there were beings of such power masquerading as mere men. He promised himself that next time he would not ignore his suspicions. He would also question Andreth more regarding what exactly Ardur and Namo had been. However, finding the opportunity to question the old lady-turned-elf was proving difficult. The other night, she had dragged him to the docks to meet an elf with a white beard who had been dressed in elegant robes. Never before had Gil-galad seen an elf with a beard. How old did an elf have to be to grow a beard? Questions about beards aside, Gil-galad had realized that this was Círdan, lord of the Falas, who apparently he was supposed to live with. Yet Andreth did not tell Círdan this. No, she had marched straight up to the elven lord and demanded a ship. The bewilderment in the ancient elf's face had almost been comical. "I do not take kindly to strangers demanding ships," Círdan answered slowly. "But I am not a stranger. Don't you recognize me?" Then Círdan looked into Andreth's eyes and visibly flinched. "Ulma's beard! Andreth of the House of Beor! You have forsaken the gift of men!" "I did as it was mine to accept or to forego, and now I ask for a ship so I can return to my one true love." "You can't just sail up the river to Nargothrond." "Why ever not? We both know the enemy hates water." "Well, for one, you need at least 2 people to crew even a small boat. I do not have any skiffs available to lend." "Perfect!" Andreth smiled. "I brought my own crewmate." She then gestured to Gil-galad, who was not expecting to be declared crewmate and thus said nothing. Or perhaps he said nothing because he really didn't want to stay in some coastal palace. He was Hallgeir of the Haladin, and he belonged under the stars. Girdan then looked at him with deep blue eyes. Something flickered in them. Andreth, he called like a parent reprimanding a child. What? He's a fine crewmate. Girdan groaned in a way of old men who recognized youthful plotting, but didn't have the energy to stop it. All right, but let me ask you, young one, do you want to go with her? Andreth sails into great danger. You're welcome to stay with me and my people. Gilgal had found himself saying that he would go. Perhaps that had been a mistake. Do you know any shanties? Andreth called to him. Since we're about to traverse the river, how about this one? Then, to Gilgalad's horror, she started to sing. Rolling up, rolling down, we'll get wine in Nargothrond. 24 hours to turn around, I go rolling down the river. When I first saw an elven ship rolling up, rolling down, I wonder where they stole the gems to go rolling down the river. Gilgalad decided then that Andreth was too happy. The boat was creaking under his feet, and who knew what creatures lay beneath the waves? The wild coast to the east looked uninhabited. If they were shipwrecked, would anyone ever find them? It seemed to the Peratelda there were greater things to mind, like shipwrecks and old men who were not old men, than she-shanties. But Andreth apparently disagreed. Manuel listened to Varda's reports that Namo was missing from Mondos. Enwa was now officially missing as well. Ulmo was a permanent resident on that particular list. I believe he likely went to Endore, Varda finished. Should we take a look through a vision cloud? Irma asked. I should be able to find Namo easily. Manuel almost didn't want to know. He knew that things went to Utumno in a handbasket a long time ago. But he sighed. All right. Irma produced his cloud and focused it on his brother. The picture that materialized before the Valar in the Ring of Doom was not what Manuel expected. Fires, tidal waves, earthquakes, and general destruction would have been predictable, but Namo was not currently starting a wildfire or leading an army of elves to war. No, of course not. Namo was fishing with Ulma. Both Valar sat on a dock in tall chairs. Namo wore a wide floppy hat, so opposed to his usual fashion that Manuel had to do a double take to make sure it was him. Ulma was smoking a pipe, and both had fishing bobbers lazily floating in the water. As if feeling that his kin were judging him, Namo looked up from beneath the brim of his floppy hat and smiled. If they get to go fishing in Endore, then I get to go on a hunt, Orma declared, standing up. Manuel saw the world explode before his eyes even as Aula began to say something about visiting the dwarves. He slammed his staff to the ground. No! Let's be thankful that Namo is only fishing. And the elves? Yavanna asked. Most appear to have gathered in Nargothrond, Irma replied. Where is Eonwe? Varda asked. The vision cloud changed to reveal the herald carrying an armful of swords. Manuel shut his eyes and would have cursed had his conscience allowed him to do so. I thought you decreed that only Ulmo could meddle with the affairs of the Eldar. Something about him having discretion. Yet here we see your own herald getting ready to lead a war campaign, Orme pointed out. And he will be repairing roofs in Valmar for the next 7 ages with his ankle shackled to the ground, Manuel said. I do not go back on my word. We already have given allowances to the Noldor by letting them have their lost kin returned to them. I say again that we will not win their battles for them. Enoi has disobeyed my explicit command. Well, he was always Maran's friend and Thuri's brother. Perhaps it was only a matter of time, said Aula, looking rather glum about not being able to visit the dwarves. And thus ended Eonwe, the Maya sighed out loud as he set the spare swords down in the cart. Also raised an eyebrow. I felt the gaze of Irmo. My lord knows I have betrayed him, the herald explained.
I don't call helping the children of Eru betrayal.
Ulmo, and by extension you, can get away with it. But Manwë told the rest of us that we could not interfere. I bet they didn't set their gaze on you.
Nope. I felt nothing. If it makes you feel better, when they boil you alive, they will probably put Namo in the same pot.
Also, your ability to comfort knows no limit. You should enter Estes service.
I like the sea too much. But that is an idea. You can serve Ulmo with me. We can make you Lord of Barnacles.
I'll take being boiled alive, thank you. That was when Idril, the golden child of Turgon, stepped in. How goes work with the armory, my lords? Almost done, Lady Idarille, despite Osse's best efforts. The shields are up front, then bows, followed by bladed weapons. Another cart is full of surplus arrows. Idril's smile was dazzling. Perfect. I'll find strong horses to pull them. These will follow the armed host in the back. I am putting the women and children first, in with a small armed escort. The main army shall follow behind them before turning north to meet the enemy. The army should turn after passing Mount Orrasse, the jagged peak just outside the Ekoriath. The eagles and I will be your eyes above. Idril nodded her understanding. Then she blushed and pulled a small package from behind her back. Here, she said. Eonwe wasn't used to receiving gifts. Puzzlement was on his fair face when he slowly unwrapped the cloth to reveal a carved horn of ivory. He froze. We found it on the ice, Idril said. My grandfather believed that it was from the War of Powers. It was. This was Thuri's horn before she fell. Eonwe could still remember how proud his little sister had been once she had finished the intricate carvings. Thank you, he said, tying the horn to his belt. Idril smiled, bowed, and danced away, eager to continue helping the evacuations. Eonwe felt a hand on his shoulder.
I know that horn,
Ossa said.
No one has heard its call in ages.
I know, Eonwe said simply. I guess that's the thing about the end of the world. It's that point where the past meets the future. Nerdanel watched her sisters by marriage spar with one another of the great underground courtyards of Nargothrond. Finarfin had declared that war was imminent, so while the girls were not quite as obsessive as Fingolfin, who had been caught doing exercises at 2 in the morning, they still knew to keep up their strength. Currently, her two best friends were sharpening their insults as well as their blades. "Fishwife!" Anaira shouted at Eärwen as she caught her twin swords awkwardly with the prongs of Eärwen's trident, blocking her strike. The Queen of Valinor laughed and twisted her weapon, which caused Anaira to drop her blades or risk dislocating a shoulder. "Oh, I'm sorry about that," the silver-haired Eleth replied as the swords clattered to the stone floor. "Looks like you're pretty but useless, or, in other words, pretty useless." Unfortunately, Eärwen had dropped her guard to deliver her insult. Anaira tackled her, and soon the two women were wrestling on the ground, light from the stained glass windows near the vaulted roof making the violet scene almost picturesque. Nerdanel thought about carving it into a canvas of wood, but then, out of the corner of her eye, she thought she caught a glimpse of red. Someone was watching them from the shadows near the door. She turned her head, but there was no one there. Leaving her friends to throttle each other, she tiptoed to the entrance of the courtyard and peered down the long hallway. Again, no one was there, just a silent stone that revealed no secrets. But Nerdanel's sixth sense was ringing. She sped down the hallway until she reached a door that was ajar. Warily, she opened it and turned on the lamp that hung in the corner by the door. The yellow light revealed a small study with bookshelves lining the walls, filled with leather-bound volumes. A thick rug carpeted the floor, and there were couches on either side. On the wall opposite the door, there was an elegant window that looked not outside, but over the grand foyer. And there, backed against the window and looking like he might attempt to jump out of it, was her eldest son. He stood even taller than she had remembered, his crimson hair cascading in loose waves.
It was slightly darker now, and more wild. Only a single clasp pulled the upper layers out of his face. A face that was now decorated with pale scars, one cutting through the fine arc of his eyebrow. Maitimo jerked his head then and looked away, hiding his face from her. Nerdanel's heart broke. "Oh, my beautiful boy," she whispered, taking slow steps forward. She reached up to cup his cheek, but he caught her hand with his own. "Do not. I am not the son that you lost. Maitimo died a long time ago." Nerdanel had never heard such nonsense in her life. She reached up with her other hand and gently turned Maitimo's head to face her. "I am a kinslayer," he said. "I am a kinslayer and a warlord. The elves call me foe of thine foe, and the orcs know me as the Deathless One and slayer of hordes. I am a murderer in these lands, and the leader of murderers. I am not who you think I am, and I am not deserving of you. Accept this and leave me to my fate." Nerdanel grasped him in the fiercest of hugs. "You are my son!" He flinched and tried to back away, but she held him all the tighter. "You are my beloved son. You are gentle and kind and crowned with grace and wisdom, even if you do not see it. And your strength inspires the weary and the downtrodden to live again." She let him go, only so she could look into those pain-filled eyes. Brushing a stray strand of hair behind her son's ear, she said, "I have heard them, you know. One of the farmers told me how if one tormented by Moringotta could live with such fire, then surely he could overcome the loss of a crop after crop. A maid with a crippled leg said that if Nelia Finue can lead armies with one hand, then she could walk again. And I heard whispers amongst the warriors. They say that the most valiant among them will find their way to Himring." Madros crumbled and bowed his head. "Yet each despises me, and rightfully so. You can credit a dragon for its power, but it is still a dragon." "And you're still my boy," Nerdanel said. Then, without hesitating, she scooped her son into her arms and lifted him with relative ease. Good thing she was always tossing those sculpting stones around. Maitimo tensed, but she kissed his brow and set him down on one of the couches so that his head was pillowed on her lap. He looked away again, and Nerdanel began to soothe his hair back like he used to when her sons were elflings. Then she sang the song that she had always sung to her children once she was sure they had fallen fast asleep. "I'll love you forever, I'll like you for always, as long as I'm living, my baby you'll be." And then the tears finally did begin to stream fast and silent down Maitimo's face. Nerdanel let him cry, and she wondered just how long her son had forced himself to be strong. "How long since you have allowed yourself to cry?" End of chapter 31. Stay tuned.